नमस्ते सर्वेभ्यः। इदानीं वयं त्रिवारम् ओङ्कारं वदामः। ॐ ॐ ॐ पठामि संस्कृतं नित्यं वदामि संस्कृतं सदा ध्यायामि संस्कृतं सम्यक् वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम् संस्कृतस्य प्रसाराय नैजं सर्वं ददाम्यहम् संस्कृतस्य सदा भक्तो वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम् संस्कृतस्य कृते जीवन् संस्कृतस्य कृते यजन् आत्मानमाहुतं मन्ये वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम् हिन्दुधर्मं समाजं च पवित्रां संस्कृतिं तथा संरक्ष्यननुकुर्यामा विश्वं शान्तिसमन्वितम्।
विक्रम अहम् उक्तवान् इदानीम् अस्माकं मध्ये जनद्वयमस्ति इसाक् कैस्टर् स्कूल् बाप्ना प्रायः मम तेषां नाम्नः उच्चारणं करोमि सम्यक् न वदेयम् cannot be able to pronounce their names properly as they should be probably. For now, let's say Isaac and Uncle. It's easier to say their first names than their last names. So both of them from Google, and we're very fortunate to have them as part of the Yuva Chetana Varga, the guest lecture series. Today is the last session for the guest lecture series. We've been meeting for last 8 weeks. Started June, I believe 6th, I think. June 11th, I'm sorry. June 11th, Saturday we started. There are 3 components to Yuva Chetana Varga. One is a leadership component. That session is on Saturdays. And Dr. Prasad Kaipa Mohodaya, who is an expert in that area, he has actually, in fact, he's the one who inspired us, so to speak, to start this Yuva Chetana Varga to begin with in 2020. That's how it started. And since that time, this is the 3rd time we've been doing it. And Dr. Prasad Kaipa has been leading that leadership classes. Also, he's trying to train some of us, particularly Smita Bhagini here and another Karyakarta within Sanskrit Bharati, so that we can take it further along with him. That meets on Saturdays. And on Tuesdays, Sanskritam component. A couple of our volunteers, Carl and Vivek, they have been teaching Sanskritam on Tuesdays for 1 hour. And then on Wednesdays, we meet, and then usually a guest lecture, Atiti Bhashanam iti vadamah. Kopi tajñah agacchati, anantaram nan vishayan svikritya tat upasthapanam charcha itarikam. So different eminent personalities have come. Today we are fortunate to have Isaac and Uncle. As I said, they have helped, within Google, taking efforts as part of their work within Google to put Sanskritam in the Google translation system. So what I would do now is request Isaac and Uncle to introduce themselves to us. That way we will know their background and how they got interested in this and how they got involved with this particular project. Specifically about projects, they will talk about after Prasad Kaipaji. So Isaac and Uncle. Let me put you on the spotlight. Let me Uncle first. Then Isaac. Isaac, what do you want to start with?
Sarvebhyo namaha. I'm Isaac Caswell. I was born and raised in Northern California. I grew up in the country in Sonoma County, and I've always liked languages. So I studied German, Spanish, French, and Irish Gaelic, and then to a smaller extent some other languages. I graduated studying symbolic systems, which includes linguistics from Stanford University, and then also did my master's in computer science AI there. And I've been working at Google Translate for the last 5 years. With respect to my interest in Sanskrit, I think probably the most obvious answer would be that for the past 5 years or so, I've been studying Carnatic classical singing, and these songs are mainly in Telugu and Sanskrit, so I get a regular dosage of it. I cannot understand it properly at all, but I do look up the meanings to the lyrics, and so I gradually get a general idea of at least some of the basics there. I don't know what else there is to say about myself, but I'll leave it at there, I guess, for now.
Ankur, भवतः किञ्चित् परिचयः?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm Ankur. I was born in Norway while my dad was studying there, but I've been raised up in India. So since I was around 2 years old to 17 years old, I was living in Indore in MP. Then I did my bachelor's in electrical engineering from IIT Bombay, and then moved to Stanford for master's in electrical engineering. So I graduated from there in 2015. I had a chance to work on some research in natural language processing and machine learning while I was at Stanford. I joined Google right after Stanford in 2015, and I've been working in different parts of Google research since then. I joined Translate in 2017, and I've been working on improving translation quality for new languages since then. Basically, languages that we don't have a lot of data for, or languages that were not supported on Google earlier. Yeah, Sanskrit. I've learned Sanskrit in high school. We took Sanskrit classes for a few years while I was at high school in Indore, and Sanskrit has always been one of the most high requested languages on Google Translate. So it was a natural thing for us to start with Sanskrit when we started working on this project to add new languages.
Uttamam. Now let me bring Dr. Prasad Kaipa Mahodaya, just 1 minute. So as I said, Dr. Prasad Kaipa Mahodaya is the chairman for Samskrita Bharati, board of directors, is the chairman of the board of directors. Prasad Kaipa has been with Samskrita Bharati in America since its inception, 1995 actually. Since 2011 has been actively involved with Samskrita Bharati, first as president of Samskrita Bharati and later as now chairman of the board of directors. And Prasad Kaipaji, after his PhD, I believe in Utah, he went on to work for Apple. He was a fellow at Apple, and later on, he got interested in using ancient knowledge from India, from Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita and other text management. And in fact, he's actually described as CEO coach. Basically, he coaches CEOs and management in management area. And would like to request Prasad Kaipaji to say a few words today.
Thank you, Govind Mahodaya. Actually, interestingly, I also grew up learning Sanskrit from a teacher who later started a Oriental high school in Andhra Pradesh. So my mother tongue was Telugu. And my brothers and sisters all went through Kovida and they all did that. But because when I was growing up, we didn't have a Sanskrit Oriental school. So I went to that gentleman who started that. So for almost 15 years, 5 days a week, I was learning Sanskrit. Plus in high school and college, I did Sanskrit. I actually got my PhD from IIT Madras in optical information storage, and then came to University of Utah as a professor. And then later I joined Apple. When I was in Apple, we were talking about intelligent agents, because at that time, the software and hardware were not advanced enough, and the processing capability was not fast enough to be able to do the knowledge systems. But we were using Prolog and Lisp and some of those old languages. And somebody pointed out, saying, because we were looking at designing tools for augmenting human intelligence, because we had a good market in education, we wanted to design various kinds of tools. Like at that time, I was in a team where we created the precursor to iPad. So if you look at the Knowledge Navigator on YouTube, you will see some of the work which we did at that time. And somebody pointed out that in India, there is a conference called Science and Spirituality through Sanskritam. There was I went to conference, and then I found out it was pretty fascinating to look at the knowledge systems according to Nyayadarshanam of Kapila. There was a lot of Tarkasastram, it is called, or Nyayadarshanam, it is called. There was a lot of stuff about information, knowledge, all of it. And I got fascinated by it, that I started spending a lot of time looking at integrating some of the Sanskrit and approaches that they did for knowledge architecture. But unfortunately, when I created this knowledge architecture in 1990, people were saying, what is this? We don't even have a data architecture. We don't know about information warehousing. What do you mean by that? So I left Apple because I was so connected with Sanskrit and Vedanta and how it can make a difference to human development, because we were really looking at how do people learn, how do people think, how do people create, how do people communicate, and how do people collaborate. These were the 5 areas Apple wanted us to design tools. So there was a guy, Alan Kay and Bill Atkinson and myself were the fellows at Apple at that time. And we were really looking at, so Alan had created Smalltalk just before that. So we were trying to see how do we create a new language or existing Sanskrit language. Because of its capabilities, we thought we could use it for AI. But of course, at that time, it was not possible. And Sanskrit was not necessarily as connected with technology, though there were a lot of work that was going on at that time. But that led me to leave Apple and focus on human development, as I learned from Upanishads and some of them. So I have been mapping some of the management approaches from the West with the management approaches that are in various texts in the, whether we talk about it, we are actually integrating from Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Yoga Vasistha, various Upanishads, and recently we started doing it from Natya Shastra, from Abhinavagupta and Bharata, rasas, the 9 rasas. How do they relate to emotional intelligence, work that has been done by Daniel Goleman. And also some work we are beginning to do with Vastu Shastra, integrating the, how do you create environment for conversations, Sanskrit conversations. So in some respects, I should say what I learned from this Medavaram Subramanya Shastri in Sanskrit, which I learned, is more of what I am using for past 30 years. You know, like, well, I was a business school professor or a CEO coach. Basically, I was using more of what I learned from those rather than my IIT or University of Utah or any of these kinds of things. So that is what I found. And I'm really glad both of you with your team, you have created the link to be able to translate Sanskrit. Of course, still it is preliminary. I can see that, like when I put Kasyas with Dhanam, it will, you know, there are various type of things that will come up right now. I think it will be improved. I'm sure you guys are working on it in terms of it, but I really love it because so many people, actually Govinda Mahodaya will say in the first batch, 2020, some of the first batch of youth, when they did the apprenticeship with one professor in Virginia Tech, we were connecting to your app, Google, trying to see how we can have Sanskrit Google translation. We try to approach some of the people. We talked to, Parthsarthi, Ranganathan, Parthsarthi. I think he's CIO for a couple of your Google units. Partha Ranganathan, he is called. So, and then several other people we were approaching. but it is really remarkable that you have gone ahead and created this. And I'm hoping that in your conversation, when you talk, you can mention about your experiences, especially because we have students who are graduating from high school. There are some students who have graduated from high school, but they are in college. There are some participants here who are in the initial stages of their jobs. So if you can share a little bit about your journey and connection with Sanskrit and how, not only Sanskrit, but self-awareness and leadership, if you can share something around that, what you have learned or some of it, I think it will be inspiring, and our people also will get a lot of value out of it. Thank you very much. And it is such a pleasure. And again, my heartfelt thanks to both of you for leading these teams and then making it happen.
धन्यवादः महोदय, महान् सन्तोषः भवान् आगतवान् इति. इदानीं एवं कुर्मः, लेट्स् yield to both Isaac and Ankur. They can talk to us about their efforts. How did they, for example, take Sanskritam and then put into the Google translation system? And also, in a sense, what does it take to put such a language into the Google translation system? And they can just give us a brief overview of what they have done. Good. And Isaac. Anyone?
Do you want to start, Ankur, or should I?
You can start, Isaac.
Sure, okay. So, as I'm sure some of you are aware, translation is a very difficult problem. So even for humans, it's very difficult, and for machines also, it's definitely very difficult. And Google Translate had managed to reach just over 100 languages, but it had sort of stalled there for many years. And the big bottleneck was the data, because previously, in order to translate the language, we needed in excess of 10 million translated sentences. And 1 million is a large number, and if you actually do the math of how many sentences that is, it's quite a large number. So the existing, all existing Sanskrit works that are digitized, put together, still do not, I think would still barely break the 1 million sentence barrier. So using traditional methods, it wasn't really possible to launch any more languages to translate. So this gives a background of sort of where we were at. So sort of on accident, at least, I just decided back when I was foolish and didn't know that these things were impossible to embark on the journey of adding more languages to translate. And this is 2 years ago, and without Ankur, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. But we've been working on it for the last 2 years, and I finally made this progress. So there are a variety of technical improvements, which I won't go into the details here because I don't think that's of interest to people as much, although we do have a paper if you want to read it. And that's mostly thanks to Ankur and some other people who did large modeling improvements in the AI models that we use, and allowed us to use text that's monolingual, that is to say, that's only in one
maybe Wi-Fi issue
doesn't require translations, which is harder to, which is very difficult to do. Now, Sanskrit is often with translations around, but it's difficult to devote particular efforts to certain languages, and also there's a lot of issues of copyright, and it all just becomes a morass of complexity. So in the end, we mainly ended up using monolingual data that we'd found. And there were a lot of challenges. I'm sure Ankur will have many more ones to share, but one I thought would be interesting to mention here is the question of language identification, and also the question of sort of in-between dialects like Sanskritized Hindi. So it's surprisingly difficult to actually detect what language something is in. And even if you can do it with 99% certainty, 1% is a very big error if, say, the amount of Hindi text online is 10 million times the size of the amount of Sanskrit text online. So when we actually tried to look for Sanskrit text on the web, we did find a fair amount of it, but our data set also had a lot of interesting things. For instance, so-called Sanskritized Hindi, that is to say Hindi which people had sort of used Sanskrit grammar for, or poor quality student Sanskrit, etc., etc. So it was a very mixed bag. And Sanskrit is in a very interesting position too, because it's not used in an everyday way in the way that many other languages are, and so it doesn't have as much sort of readily available data online for that purpose. So we did end up finding data set and applied various cleaning techniques. You will notice sometimes that yes, the model has many ways to improve, and sometimes it does still produce Hindi for certain inputs, and we're working on that, and that's a result of the difficulty of finding clean data. But I don't know, I could sort of ramble on and on about different things, but Ankur, do you want to add some more things at this point?
Yeah, I can add just a little bit on top of Isaac's description. So basically, as Isaac described, up until 2 or 3 years back, the way we added languages was we tried to find data for these languages on the web, and then we tried to find translated sentences into English for each sentence that we are finding for these languages, and that is forming our supervised data set. And we used to need around 10 million samples per language to be able to train a translation model of high quality. But our developments on the research side sort of enabled us to train these translation models without needing any supervised translation data. So basically, this model can just look at Sanskrit sentences, train on these Sanskrit sentences by themselves, and then learn to translate them into English. Because we have a lot of supervised data for languages that are similar to Sanskrit. So we have languages like Hindi, we have a lot of Indian languages that we have data for, that we have translation supervised data for. So the model can learn how to translate from that data, and then the model can learn Sanskrit from just the Sanskrit data, and then basically be able to learn to translate Sanskrit into English. So that's the approach. And the major challenge, as Isaac mentioned, is identifying high quality Sanskrit data on the web. So we still need a large amount of Sanskrit. Even if it's Sanskrit only data, we need high quality Sanskrit only data in large amounts to be able to train these models. So if you've played around with the model, you'll see that it sometimes make mistakes. Like if you try to translate from English to Sanskrit, sometimes it will translate it into Hindi, or it wouldn't do really well at more Vedic or more classical type of Sanskrit on if you have a lot of Sandhi in your Sanskrit, and if you try to translate it into English. So there are challenges that this model faces because the quality of the data that we find is sort of limited to some extent. So those are some of the things that we're looking into, not just for Sanskrit, but also for other languages, on trying to understand how we can identify even higher quality data on the web. But yeah, I think it's sort of culmination of this research that we've been working towards on being able to train models that can learn from a lot of different languages, be able to leverage the supervised data that we have for languages where we have a lot of data to sort of also improve languages where we don't have that much data. So that finally we've been able to sort of support Sanskrit and Google.
What we can do now is, if they have questions for either of them or any comments that we may have, we can share. And that way, Ankur and Isaac, if the question is pertaining to what they have done, if they know any response, they could provide the thing. Professor Kaipaji raised his hand.
One of the things, like if you are doing it based on supervised data from other languages and some of them, do you use grammar rules and Sanskrit grammar rules, and you input any of them, or not necessarily? You are doing just deep learning by getting various stuff. How are you going about? And also, by the way, one reason why I'm asking, let me put it so that we don't have to make it technical for other people as well. Is by looking at your translation approach, does that help us to create, even when we are teaching Sanskrit or we are translating English into Sanskrit or Sanskrit in English, can we use that ourselves? So whatever methodology that you are using, is it teachable to human beings, not just computers? So it is like reverse of what we are doing. I'm curious about your thoughts on how usable it is to teach a young child with your approach. Do you think you can teach them languages faster? Is that an accelerated learning approach to learn Sanskrit through your approach?
So to start with, on your first question, we do not input any grammar rules. So in the 80s and 90s, people tried to do translation with grammar rules, and there were teams of expert linguists who worked for years, and it turns out language is just too complicated for this. So it's all deep learning, which is, sometimes it makes a silly grammar mistake, and you think, couldn't you just apply this well-known thing? But it turns out it's too complicated for that. In terms of, could this be used to teach humans? Well, I guess there's two ways of looking at the question that you asked. One way is, can we somehow use the same techniques we use to teach the deep learning model to teach humans? And I'd say pretty much no. I mean, the model is just doing some sort of mysterious thing in vector space, and it's possible that at some point in the future people will figure out how to make it more interpretable, but it's not there. But what it could be used for is as a learning tool. So actually, for many languages, one of the big use cases for Google Translate is helping people learn the language. As long as you know that you cannot trust the answer blindly, it can be very helpful to give you inspiration for, like, say you're not sure how to say something, it'll produce something, you'll be like, oh yes, that's how you say it. It'll give you ideas for what constructions might work. It's a useful tool, again, as long as you know that you can't just trust what it says without looking twice.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the two? The Yuvachetana. Ananya, do you have a question?
Maybe if that something is not coming through, you can put it on a chat session.
I think looks like anybody else? Ananya probably has audio problem, and she can send it via text to us. If anybody else has any question? Yuvachetana group. Vignesh. Vignesh. Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I'm not too familiar with the technical aspects of like deep learning or supervised learning or whatever the different categories are, but is it possible to produce, data that can be used to, train the model itself? Like, for example, instead of looking for existing Sanskritam literature, would it be possible to like enlist somebody that's a grammarian or somebody that knows Sanskrit really well to like kind of write out sentences and have that train the model?
Funny, we can never tell who's going to answer the question, but I guess I clicked first. Yes, for sure, human translators, professional human translators, would be very helpful. When they produce data, we trust it more and we can use it to get gains in the model. The main issue is just how many translations we need. It costs a lot. So if someone were suddenly to give us $10 million grant or something, I'm sure we could improve it. This said, there are some public organizations, which I can't remember the name of who it is right now, but they're working on doing exactly this, making a large corpus of human translated Sanskrit text that can be used for anyone to improve their models.
I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
So Isaac and Ankur, there are some questions in the chat area. If you can kind of read that question, then answer to the audience. That would be better. That way, this get recorded in YouTube also.
So I guess I can take the first question. So when introducing yourselves, you mentioned low data languages. I suppose that was me. What are some other low data languages that are out there? So that's a good question. I think typically when we refer to low languages as low data languages, these are not low data languages. I mean, there are lots of people who use these in their communities. These are low data from the perspective of what data is available on the internet, because that's what machine learning researchers typically have access to. So I would sort of take it the other way. So there are 7,000 plus languages that people speak in the world. And the internet is dominated by 30, 40-ish languages where you have a lot of data on the web, you have a lot of web pages, you have a lot of forums where people communicate in these languages. So these are typically languages where you can find a lot of text data, where you can find a lot of people posting YouTube videos, etc. on the web. So we typically refer to those as high resource languages, and pretty much all the other languages which are hard to find, but hard to find on the internet, not hard to find in the world. Those are in machine learning circles referred to as low data languages. I wouldn't call them low data languages as such, because there are people who are using these languages and it's not really low data.
Okay.
And
I would like to ask a question.
There's one more question in the chat area by Shreya. Do you want to take it? Which coding language is used most frequently?
yeah, sure. Also, I was just going to emphasize what Ankur said, that yes, it's basically most languages that exist are low resource or low data from the perspective of model. So basically any region in the entire world is going to be full of languages that you may or may not have heard of. Even Europe, which has the most data in general, but yes, they're all over. But yes, Shreya's question is, which coding language is used most frequently when translating languages and natural language processing in general? So Python is by and away the most often used just in general throughout academia. And then C++ is used a fair amount for people who are doing things that are faster. And I personally also use a lot of shell script, but I feel like I'm in the minority there.
Tamam. Dharmendra has a question. Dharmendra, you can Agachit Bhavaneva Puchatu.
Dhanyawad, Maury. So yeah, thanks for this talk. So I was just wondering, is there any efforts towards open sourcing so that the external collaboration can help out or expedite your, this particular work? Thank you.
Yeah. So we are talking about how we can try to open source these data sets and models. So nothing is final yet. We're still in discussion phases on what's possible there. But we are trying from our end to see if we can open source either the data that we have or the models that we have in some form.
And are there any communications happening with, because there are many tools like ashtadhyayi.com. Are there any cross collaboration that is happening, or is Google working in isolation with its own technology, or are you trying to collaborate with other people who are actually working in this area, particularly ashtadhyayi.com?
I'm not familiar with the particular website you're talking about. There are a few collaborations that are in the works that I alluded to before, and at least one organization that I reached out to who preferred not to share their data because of conflict of interest. But yes, there are collaborations that are inching forward.
Good to know. Thank you.
We do have one person here who is associated with ashtadhyayi.com, Avinash Varna. We'll introduce him later on. Then I think Naresh Kuntur has a question. Let's take, hopefully we can put him on. Naresh Kuntur is, can you switch on the video, Naresh?
Sure. So nice work. My question was, there was this talk about in this year's CVPR, and people just wondering. So if you want to go from language A to language B, how feasible is it to use images as an intermediate representation? So now that DALL-E has gotten so good and it's able to synthesize ridiculous images from just text, any thoughts on using that as an intermediate thing?
I can answer that maybe. So I have seen some work around using images as intermediate forms or using images to aid translation in some way. But I think the research on using images to improve translation quality is still in a very nascent stage. I don't think we are not planning to incorporate that research anytime soon. But machine learning research in general seems to be moving towards these models that can learn from a lot of different types of data and represent a lot of different types of data. So different languages, then images and text in the same model, etc. Right. So it is very much possible that our research would move in that direction too, and maybe a few years from now, the models that we use for translating would use images in some form. But as of now, we are not planning to sort of look in that direction because it's I think it's too nascent from like a production kind of perspective.
Uttamam. Then we do have Avinash Varna in the here. Let's see if I can locate him. I could. Avinash Varna is one of our volunteers, just like Naresh Kuntur. Avinash Varna, you had a suggestion or comment? Mute Pandi Asti.
Namaste. Just to quickly clarify, I'm not directly associated with ashtadhyayi.com. I contributed some of the data on the verbal forms, so that was only my minor contribution. But anyway, I think I just wanted to follow up on the discussion earlier about using some of the techniques that were used to train the model for people to learn, right? I think while Isaac's comment about mysterious vector spaces and the actual training algorithms perhaps cannot be directly adapted, I think some of the other techniques that were used in your research, such as the back translation approach, right, where you first translate and then translate back and then compare, I think that's in fact how people do learn, right? You maybe try to come up with the sentence yourself and then check whether a native speaker would have probably used the same thing if you had like a reference. And then that's how people tend to improve. They listen to other people who speak and then try to pick up some words or phrases or idioms, right? So any thoughts on other things that you used in your research that perhaps could be adapted in some form to how people could improve their learning? Would you first agree that maybe the back translation is somehow similar to how people learn, or maybe not?
I mean, it's somewhat similar, sure. I mean, and then also reading parallel texts, people do read translations. There's only really one other technique we use, which is basically fill in the blank, which is used to some extent. And it turns out to be super effective for machines. So who knows, maybe it's better than we think for humans. But basically, the task is you see a sentence with a certain number of words just removed, and you have to guess what the words are. So I have the feeling that there are probably more elegant ways to do this for people. But who knows, maybe you could adapt that to make a surprisingly effective technique.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. We can try to create some games around that at least, perhaps, and then see how effective it is.
Tamam. Chetan Pandey from Singapore, you here? Chetan had a
yes. Sorry. Yes, I am. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you switch on your video?
Certainly. So
let's see. Where did I? Yes, I got you here. Just 1 minute. Chetan has a suggestion basically. So Chetan Pandey is from Singapore. So Chetan has been working in IT field for a long time, and he basically actually sponsors. He donates a part of his earnings in India for promoting where the old Sanskrit texts are there in palm leaves and other things to be researched and published, kind of thing. And Chetan Pandey has a suggestion.
So Mr. Isaac and Ankur, basically, I have a small venture. It's called eGangotri Trust, and what we are doing, we are scanning rare books of Sanskrit and primary, secondary, and tertiary scholarship on Sanskrit texts. And we have already digitized 40,000 books, which includes handwritten manuscripts. A quarter of that figure is handwritten manuscripts. And besides that, I've collected more than 2 to 3 lakh ebooks related to Sanskrit from scholars globally. And I was wondering if these scans were OCR'd by your system using Google Lens or those high software, will that add to your data? If yes, my data is all for free donation. So those 2 to 3 lakh ebooks, which would represent maybe 10 hard drives of 4 terabyte each, so maybe 30 to 40 terabyte, I would be happy to donate you if you would like to utilize it.
If it were digitized in a form that the computer could read, that definitely sounds like a very nice amount of data. The running of the OCR is definitely not trivial either. But yeah, if it could be converted into text form and it were clean text, that could be very useful to us. Thank you for the offer.
I'll be happy. If you like to have it, you can contact me. I will leave my WhatsApp number, and you can contact me. I'll be happy to donate everything.
Thank you.
So we'll take last 2 questions or comments. If I know that in the text, some of you have sent some questions. What we'll do is we will take those questions and then get some feedback from Ankur and Isaac and share it with the group later on. But right now, here in the meeting, if you have any question or comment, please feel free to raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you and you can ask the question or tell the comment or share the comment. Anybody from the Yuva Chetana Varga group?
Mahodaya, I have a question. So on that same what Chetan Mahodaya mentioned, so when you say you're looking for data online, so do you look for Sanskrit data also corresponding translation into English? I just want to understand when you say data, what you're looking for online.
So I can answer that this time. So we are for the new approach, we are typically just looking for Sanskrit data. So we are not looking for translations. If there are translations, we can definitely use them too. So if we can find translations from Sanskrit into say Hindi or Sanskrit into English, we can use those too. But for this model, we were looking only for just pure Sanskrit sentence data.
Okay. I think in that direction, I mean, there could be some way Samskrita Bharati can contribute, something which we can take it offline. Yeah.
Uttamam. Then what we'll do in the remaining 10 minutes or so, 2 things we would like to do. One is we have, as I said, some of the Sanskrit Bharati volunteers who have been with Sanskrit Bharati for a long time. Just like you both, Ankur and Isaac, they're also in the IT field, but with the passion in Sanskritam. They also have come here to introduce some of them. And later on, we would like to start a new initiative today, so using this as an opportunity. That is basically a group in Sanskrit Bharati, people in the IT field, IQ, and interest in Sanskritam. So we'd like to make a group like that so that we can meet once in a while and then think about how else we can really contribute to promoting this in the technology area, basically, bringing the two, that's Sanskritam and technology together, kind of. Anyway, we first introduced some of the volunteers, as I said. First, I need to find them here in the list. It will take a couple of minutes. Please bear with me. One is Dharmendra Sarkar. We bring them here as an Mahodaya, switch on the video from Naresh Kuntur. Naresh, switch on the video, please. And Avinash, switch on the video. Naresh, there's one minute. I'll bring Naresh. So अत्र इतोपि न सन्ति अनन्तरं तेषां परिचयं कारयामि प्रथमं तु गिरिमहोदय अहं श्रुतवान् आनयामि अविनाश वर्मा इति अविनाश वर्मा he lives in Phoenix area, Arizona. PhD, went on to work with Intel. That's where he is now working in Phoenix. And Avinash, although he's in IT, his the other part is actually Sanskritam. So he is an advanced teacher actually in Sanskrit Bharati. Actually, some of the people here, Avinash, Naresh, and other people within Sanskrit Bharati, their Sanskrit knowledge is much more than some of the people who they get a PhD in Sanskritam type of thing. So much advanced, and they do advanced classes here. Avinash Varna is one such person. And then second person here is Naresh Kuntur. He also did his PhD from UMD. And I think he works in the security area, right? If I'm not mistaken. Naresh?
I work in
Image
computer
processing.
vision.
Oh, okay. I forget these different fields. So Naresh also an advanced teacher, and both of them not only teach, they write. They also, post poetry in Sanskritam. So then we have Dharmendra Sarkar. He is also in IT field, interest in Sanskritam. And we have one more person here. I want to introduce that person also, Giri Mahodaya. Giri Mahodaya has to. Giri Mahodaya's video is not on. So Giri Bharatan, he lives in Boston. He has been with Sanskrit Bharati since 2001. And he is our vice president and also a member of the board. Giri Mahodaya Agitwan. So इतोपि अनेके तत्र सन्ति तेषां परिचयं वयं कारयामः. And as I said, we will take this opportunity to form a group within Sanskrit Bharati, people who are interested, who work in IT industry and passion for Sanskritam, so that we can take this a little further. What Ankur and Isaac have done, that is within Google, in the Google efforts. So similarly, for example, Avinash, Naresh, all these people, they also have doing a lot of volunteer work. For example, we conduct what we call Shuyatam Pratidinam Moonam, meaning listen to a Sanskritam original text daily type of thing. So initially Ramayanam, we took Ramayanam, then Avinash together the Ramayanam audio recording was there. Somebody from India had created the audio recording, and then he took the text, and then he and others created the alignment tool basically, so that we can display the text and at the same time be able to listen to the audio. So we did that for Ramayana, and then he also created a similar alignment tool with others. Amarkosha, the the important thesaurus in Sanskritam, the very toughest kind during those days. So similarly, H. Kuntur and other people also have been doing a lot of this kind of things where in Sanskritam and also kind of IT type of software tools and other things, and putting them together so that it becomes easier for people to learn, appreciate, and understand. So we would like to do that. And then Dharmendra Sarkar, actually this idea came when, as I said, Chetan Pandey from Singapore was visiting the US. He has come here to work and at the same time meet people. When meeting with him, this idea came, and Dharmendra was also in that meeting. We would like to form an informal group within Samskrita Bharati of people working in IT, interested in Sanskritam. And Dharmendra Sarkar has agreed to lead that group to begin with. So what we will do is reach out to people like all of you, and also college students who are pursuing their IT, degree, but interested in Sanskritam. They're also welcome. And then we'll form a group, and then this group will meet once a quarter, to begin with, so that initially an online meeting, so that we can bring ideas and things like that, see how we can take it further. So I would like to request Giri Muhodaya as our Vice President of Sanskrit Bharati and also one of the board members to formally say that, okay, let's have this group together. Muhodaya?
Oh, I don't know why you want me to formally say it, but I'm definitely excited to look into the possibilities and basically explore this further. But actually, also, I'm not a Luddite, which is basically an anti-technology person. But still, when I heard about first, when a couple of months ago, when the whole Google Translate support for Sanskritam came up, and so many people forwarded those messages to me, I was like, okay, now what do the children who are in the SAFL program, how serious are they going to take the process of studying Sanskritam, learning Sanskritam? Could that be an unintended consequence of people now using this tool for other things? So that basically had come up in my mind. I know that is, I mean, any tool would have some of the side effects too, but I'm definitely very happy. I mean, very excited and thrilled to explore the possibilities and take this, further.
So Ankur and Isaac, for your information, what Giri mentioned, a SAFL program. It's actually Sanskritam as a foreign language for high school students. As you know, in America, students have to learn a foreign language as part of their high school program credits. So Sanskrit Bharati, under the leadership of Giri Muhodaya, we call Muhodaya just to as a title in the end, with respect. So Giri and other volunteers helped us put together this SAFL program. It's a three-year online program for people, high school students, to learn Sanskritam. In fact, many of the attendees in this particular Chaitanya Varga, the leadership program that we are now having, many of them have completed SAFL and then are here actually. Then many of them go on to, Giri Muhodaya said, volunteer for Sanskrit Bharati, as come back and teach in SAFL or other places also. So that's what we are going to, this SAFL program has been there since 2009. And incidentally, just yesterday, day before yesterday, we got a news, the SAFL team shared with us that University of California system, the UC system, it has not recognized Sanskritam as a world language and our SAFL program. And now it does. So that's a very good news on the heels of what you two have done within Google. So I think that there's a lot of good things happening in the Sanskritam field, and having this, as I said, little IT cell, so to speak, within Sanskrit Bharati, people working in IT, in Sanskritam, and taking it further, that will really help in many ways. So Dharmendra Mohodaya, Dhanyavadaha, Evam Karoti iti. Anantaram, Yada Kadapi, Agre, किं भवति इति वयं चिन्तयामः।
अस्तु।
इदानीं स्मिता भगिनी प्रार्थयामि। तत्र धन्यवादसमर्पणं करोतु। क्षणम् अत्र तत्र स्पाट्लैट् इत्यादिकम् अहम् अत्र निवारयामि, तदनन्तरं कर्तुं शक्नोति। भगिनि?
आम् महोदय, श्रूयते वा?
श्रूयते।
नमस्ते, बहु धन्यवादः अंकुर महोदयः, ऐसाक् महोदयः, भवन्तः इदानीं समयः, you took your precious time and you came here, so that was very insightful. So we thank you so much about this. We the Samskrita Bharati volunteers that we are present here, we want to thank you, and especially the youth, as Giri Mahodaya said, they are, most of them are from SAFL, and we are really looking forward to them do some kind of a contribution into this as well, so because they are young, so young and energetic, so hopefully there will be some kind of a connect going forward. So really looking forward to that opportunity to working with you guys, and we are so excited that you came to our program, and it was a high success. Dhanyavadaha.
Smita Bhagini, bhavati eva mangalasakam uktva samapayatu. So for the information of Ankur and Isaac, so what we do is we normally start any program, class, meeting, anything within Samskrita Bharati with the 4 shloka Dhyeya mantra in the beginning. Pathami Samskritam Nityam. We start with that. And then we end it with Shanti mantra, that is Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah. That's what Smita Bhagini will be doing it now. Smita Bhagini.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Dhanyawad. अस्तु भगिनि, भवती तद् वीडियो इत्यादिकं स्टाप् करोतु।